It's an oft-used phrase with BYU fans, and that is BYU needs more disruption on defense. Well, this position group has a lot of talent, but it's short on experience.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone and a 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host here on this fine podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Happy Pioneer Day to all of you out there, no matter where you're at in Cougar Nation, literally in the state of Utah, where we celebrate the holiday, or outside. Regardless, happy Pioneer Day. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk BYU defensive ends. Who is going to emerge as BYU's threats off of the edge? We'll dig into that. Then we're going to talk with a guy by the name of Bruce Feldman. You probably have heard of him. He's been around the college football universe for a long time as a noted writer, but more importantly, broadcaster, etc. Had a great chance to talk with him about BYU and expectations for the Cougars in 2025. You'll hear his thoughts coming up. And we're going to finish up talking about the UCF Knights, a curious program who BYU will face in their season finale coming up this fall. Could be a cold one in Provo, much like it was against Houston last November. But UCF, are they ready to really get it going again under Scott Frost? Well, Matt Marchelle from the Orlando Sentinel will explain coming up on today's show. All right. Let's talk BYU defensive ends right out of the chute here. Now, I mentioned in the open of today's show that BYU often has fans saying, hey, they need more disruption on defense. Well, edge players, defensive ends, outside linebackers, and the like, their expectation is that they're the ones that are going to kind of lead that charge on making more havoc, as they say, in the backfield. Strip sacks, sacks in general, making opposing quarterbacks feel uncomfortable in the pocket, really just forcing the issue when it comes to BYU's defense. That's one of the key things they're trying to find. The question is, losing guys like Tyler Batty, Isaiah Banya from last year's team, is that if you look at the roster for BYU defensive end, I've got it up in front of me here, you've got a lot of guys who are long on talent, but fairly short on experience. Names like Bodie Schoonover, Ephraim Asiata, Viliami Apuha, Kinilau Fonohema. There's a lot of really, really solid names, big recruiting wins in recent memory for BYU, guys you've been hoping to see really kind of emerge on the scene for BYU defensively. The question is going to be, which of these guys is actually going to do just that and become that threat off of the edge that BYU has been needing seemingly forever under Kalani Sitake? Well, if you go by experience factor, I think the two headliners are Bodie Schoonover and Logan Latui. Now, Latui got another year added to his eligibility clock and decided to return to BYU this year. He's got the most experience of the entire bunch. He's been a spot starter at times, I should say, during his time as a Cougar so far. And at 6'2", 255 pounds, he has got the size requisite that you want to come off the edge, but can he really become that every down defensive end that BYU needs? Or can Bodie Schoonover, now that he's finally got an opportunity to do that at 6'3", 265 pounds, he's your prototypical size as a DN. Can he finally emerge as one of the guys who's got the most experience? But I can't absolve anybody in this group from expectations being heaped upon them, because they've added two guys via the transfer portal, and Tausili Akana and Hunter Clegg, who are thoroughbreds, 4-star prospects in their own right. Obviously, Akana going to Texas for a while, then transferring back to BYU. Hunter Clegg originally signing with Utah out of high school and then deciding to go to BYU after his mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Those two are expected to come in and make noise early on. My question for them is really, in case of Akana, has he been able to bulk up? They list him on the spring roster at 6'3", 235 pounds. That's linebacker size. If he's up to 245, 250, sure, okay, absolutely, I'll buy into that. Clegg's got more of the prototypical size, 6'4", 245, but as we all know, missionaries, it takes time to get back off the mission and really, as I say, knock off that mission rust. How soon can he do just that? And that would be a question for those two. But you also have other guys in this mix. Ephraim Asiata is an absolute spark plug as a pass rusher, but he's listed generously at 6'3", 210 pounds. I wonder if he can really pack on much more weight than that. And if he can't, I think Ephraim's ceiling, quite honestly, is as a third down specialist. That means coming in third down passing situations and going after the quarterback. At 210 pounds, you simply just cannot hold up to play every down as a defensive end in that mix. I heard some really, really nice things about Orion Maile Kafusi during spring camp this year, and he's at 6'3", 240 pounds, so some pretty good size in his own right. But if you go down this list, Viliame Buaha, who's at 6'3", 265 pounds, Kenny Laufonohema, 6'5", 240, Vincent Tautua, 6'3", 250. All of these guys at defensive end have got the prototypical length measurement requirements you want at defensive end. But the question is, of the 8 or 9 guys I've listed here, who is going to emerge and become that star? Tyler Batty has been that guy since 2020 until last year for BYU. Think about it. He emerged during the pandemic year for BYU and then was kind of that stalwart at defensive end during his entire time as a Cougar over the ensuing years. Now that mantle needs to be passed to somebody, and I'm excited to see in fall camp who takes that opportunity and runs with it, because you can't say that it's going to be this guy or that guy, because if you say that, you could look like the fool, because it could be that guy and that other guy in the mix. I love the fact that this is going to be a true competition at defensive end for BYU. I have some personal favorites in that mix, absolutely, as we all do. You can probably think of guys. I watched Hunter Clegg single-handedly wreck game plans at American Fork High School. I think given adequate time, it may not be until 2026 before he's ready to really emerge, but I'm telling you, Hunter Clegg has got the game-breaking ability as a defensive end that I'm excited to see. But my question is he really going to be able to bring that to bear for 12, potentially 13 or more games this year for BYU? It would be hard pressed to say he's going to be able to do just that. If he does, great. But you look at it and say, okay, you got to give him a little bit of time to adjust to life as a football player. But I also like guys like Ephraim Asiata. I think Tausili Akana, should he put on the weight, both those guys, should they put on some weight, can be difference makers for BYU. I have loved Bodie Schoonover's potential his entire time at BYU, and now that he's a redshirt junior, he's got 2 years now to really kind of make the position his own. Are other guys going to unseat him once again, or is he going to finally seize the opportunity and become a star for this BYU team? That is a great question. I think the only guy that can really answer that, quite honestly, is a guy like Kelly Papinga as the edges coach for BYU. He will be putting these guys through their paces. I know that Chad Kauha'a has also been working with BYU's defensive ends for quite some time now. Those two will tag team and ensure that these guys are put through their paces. And whoever emerges in that 2 deep at minimum, the expectation is that, yeah, you come off the edge and you create havoc in the backfield for opposing teams, strip sacks in general, just getting after the quarterback and making them uncomfortable. It's been one of the big bugaboos for BYU's defense under Kalani Sitake is their inability to really get consistent, sustained pressure on the opposing quarterback. Can this group of guys, can they find 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in that group that can do just that? If they do, Jay Hill's defense is going to be even more ferocious than it was in a season ago. And the nice part is having guys like Keanu Tanuvasa, Justin Kirkland in the middle of the defense should take some of the pressure off these defensive ends. And if they can win some one-on-one battles, could create that type of havoc that BYU is looking for off the edge. All right, coming up next, we're going to catch up with Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports, does some broadcasting, is a big-time writer, does an incredible job covering the sport of college football. What does he make of BYU in 2025? What does he like about guys like Kalani Sitake as a head coach of the BYU football program? I had a chance to catch up with him at Big 12 Media Days, and we're going to get into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys in terms of having fun this summer with your sports. No matter if you're interested in baseball, golf on the green, or soccer action, because it's going on seemingly everywhere when it comes to football, as I like to say. FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting along the way. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. You maybe can collect some money to cap off your sports watching experience. The best part is you can track your favorite matchups. The app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. And more importantly, whether you're placing a same game parlay or watching a bet right into the 9th inning or late into stoppage time, the best part is FanDuel makes it help you feel like you're part of the action along the way. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers right now can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Simple as that. First $5 bet, if it wins, you got $150 in your account. More to play with, more to have fun with our friends over at FanDuel. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Of course, it's all courtesy of your friends at FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, time to get another national voice to talk BYU football. As many of you know, I was down at Big 12 Media Days in Frisco, Texas. Had a great number of opportunities to catch up with both local and national reporters. And I love the fact I get to talk to people when it's kind of more of a laid-back atmosphere. Many of you know I work in sports radio, and that can be a little more of a go thing when it comes to the actual season. But the media days or where people can kind of unwind just a little bit and be a little more, let their hair down, I guess is the best way to say it. And I had a great chance to catch up with Bruce Feldman. This guy's as busy as anybody in sports media. He does big noon kickoff features for Fox Sports, writes obviously for The Athletic, does an incredible job covering the sport of college football. He's been around the game for a really, really long time. He's one of the most respected voices when it comes to this game. And I love reading and watching his stuff. And I had a great opportunity to catch up with him at Big 12 Media Days. We talked a lot about BYU, Kalani Sitake, and a whole lot more. And here you go. Here's that conversation.
BYU's in a bit of a pickle right now with their quarterback situation. What do you make of the Cougars, even with the Jake Retzloff situation pending out there?
I think they're really good on defense. You got great linebackers. You have a good core of receivers, and you got good running backs. Especially like last year, they were banged up for a while, and then LJ got together. I definitely think Retzloff is a blow because when he was healthy last year and not banged up, I thought he made a lot of key plays. Even, there could be some wow throws. There might be some, questionable decisions in there, but also like it's 3rd and 4, and they'll run option with him, and he'll pitch it, and he just, made a bunch of plays. And I think with his experience and what they could do with him, that's going to be tough. Doesn't mean that they don't have options, but I thought they were a top 25 team with him. I'm interested to see what they're like without him. But they have a lot of weapons on offense.
Now, Kalani enters his 10th year as head coach. What has been your perception of him running the BYU football program?
Yeah, I think he's an awesome guy. Like when you just said 10 years, I'm like, man,
it seems like it flew. Yeah.
I know. Early in his tenure, I did sideline when BYU played at Washington. And I knew him, but was sitting in the meetings. You could just kind of feel his presence. And you could totally see why guys respect him, why guys want to play for him. I mean, he's one of the best people in college football. There's a genuine, like an authentic vibe to him. It's great that they have, I don't want to say that I've been super patient with him, but like now it feels like he's got momentum. I mean, I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about Kalani. And that's pretty unusual in the football world.
Yeah. Obviously, the Big 12, it feels like it could be a league where you go 8 or 9 teams deep. What's your perception of the league as a whole?
It definitely is. I mean, last year, I remember we did our podcast, and we talked about how I thought there was as many as 10 teams could win the league, and it turned out one of the other teams that I didn't list actually won the league. I think there's very little margin for error and talent gap between everybody. There are a lot of good quarterbacks in the league this year. I'm fascinated to see how this plays out. You had 3 11-win teams last year. Obviously, BYU was one. Iowa State was one. ASU. I feel like Iowa State's going to be really good. I feel like ASU should be good again, even without Scatteraboo. I'm interested to see somebody comes out of nowhere usually, though, in this league. I don't know who that's going to be.
As you look forward with the future of college football, are you thinking that this House settlement might settle things down, or you think we're in it for the long haul?
I mean, nothing ever settles college football. There's always workarounds and people working in the margins, and that's just the way it's been, and I assume that's the way it's always going to be.
As BYU tries to kind of gets itself like ingrained in Power 4 football, what do you think their biggest hurdle is going to be, in your opinion?
That's a good question. I don't know, because you have a national brand. Obviously, they just got a huge recruit, you know, and I think given what they did last year, we Big Noon, we were out there, I want to say in like early November. It's a really cool environment. It's a gorgeous part of the country. But I think having the Big 12 affiliation, to me, this is big. Can they sustain it? I don't know if they, whether they win 11 games this year, but as long as you don't fall back to like 6 and 7 or, or 5 and 7 or 4 and 8, like if they go win 9 games, I think it's something they can keep building off of. And I think they're in a good place. I also think, even though it's not football, I think when your school gets the number one, basketball recruit in the country, and if AJ goes on and becomes a lottery pick or the first pick in the draft, that certainly doesn't hurt BYU because it's more people talking about BYU athletics.
I think we heard Coach Prime up there said, "You watch us to win, you watch us to lose. They're still watching us." I think that's the same thing for every program. You just want people to keep eyeballs on you. And you think that the recruiting BYU is doing with NIL, AJ DeBonce, the Ryder Lines, is that going to be a differentiator for them in your opinion?
It definitely could be. I just think it's like keep building the brand and keep getting out there. Like I'm old enough to remember in the 80s when BYU was cranking out quarterbacks and had its identity. And Bronco was a good coach, but I think you go from independent. I think it's hard to be an independent. Like Notre Dame was an independent, but the one thing I always felt, and don't just mean this in a negative way towards BYU, was like people would tune in. They hated Notre Dame. There may be Utah fans who hate BYU, but I just don't know people who hate BYU. They may be indifferent. Whereas I just think the independent space is hard to live in the college football world, especially now.
There you have it, Bruce Feldman. A big thank you to him for taking the time to join us here on Locked On Cougars. Had a great chat, obviously, and you can tell this is a guy you heard him talk about. I have never heard somebody say a bad word about Kalani Sitake, and he said it's pretty rare in this business because Bruce, his job, he gets a lot of dirt on a lot of people. I can tell you just from experience, as little as my experience is, Bruce gets dirt on everybody. For him to say there's not been a bad word ever said about Kalani Sitake and all the conversations he's had with people over the years, it's pretty impressive stuff. And BYU's really lucky to have a guy like Kalani Sitake running the BYU football program. But more importantly, a big thank you to Bruce Feldman for taking the time to talk with myself and obviously examine BYU's chances this coming season. And we'll see how it all plays out. You can tell he's hedging his bet a little bit, speaking of Bruce, in terms of what he expects from BYU. But honestly, I think we all are, because there's question marks about BYU after an 11-2 campaign. Can they have that sustained success? And without Jake Retzloff there, it continues to kind of be a question mark, I think, especially in the minds of the national media about, okay, where's the ceiling for this BYU football program? And we're all going to find out together this fall. All right, coming up next, going to check in on another future opponent for BYU, UCF. Scott Frost kind of starting things over with the Knights in his second stint at the helm of the Central Florida football program. I had a chance to catch up with Matt Marchelle, who covers UCF for the Orlando Sentinel, also some national college football stuff as well. He had a lot of thoughts on what BYU could expect come the end of the season. That's the thing, is this is 12 games out for BYU when they face off against UCF, what the expectations are for the Knights and what they could look like by the time they come to Provo in late November. We'll get to that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well out there, and hope many of you will be signing up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU. The link is in the show notes below, and if you're interested and want help with it, reach out to me via social media. We'll get you squared away. Obviously, happy to help you guys get set up with the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, let's catch up with UCF Knights. Matt Marchelle is the Orlando Sentinel's beat writer covering UCF. Obviously, an interesting season ahead. The first year of the second run with Scott Frost at the helm of the Knights program. He made headlines at Big 12 Media Day by saying that taking the Nebraska job where he was an alum was a bad decision. And I guess in retrospect, it kind of looks that way. He led UCF to some pretty incredible heights. Think about this. They obviously believe they won a national title when they went undefeated with Scott Frost as their head coach. Can he get it going as quickly as he did once again in Orlando? It's a big question mark, and Matt Marchelle addressed that and obviously what BYU could expect come the end of the season when UCF shows up in Provo. Here's that conversation from Big 12 Media Days.
UCF, obviously, a whole new era, but a kind of a throwback to an era in a way. What are you expecting from the Knights?
Well, I think with Scott Frost's return, I think it's a lot of excitement surrounding him coming back to the program. But I think, he's kind of tried to temper those expectations because he understands that they've got over 70 new players on this roster, and he's hasn't been coaching at a college level in almost 2 years. So when he first arrived, he had to really kind of pick up everything again, had to understand exactly what's going on with the transfer portal, what's going on with NIL. Now you add revenue sharing and all those other wonderful things like that. And it's really kind of been a hard lesson. He kind of got thrown in the deep end of the pool, so to speak. So he's been trying to say, listen, we understand people aren't going to look at us and think that we're going to do really well this year. He's like, but I like that. That's what he was talking about, is this idea that, he wants to be the underdog. Yeah. He wants to take that kind of forward because he feels like that gives them an opportunity maybe to surprise some teams.
Obviously, he was ultra successful when he was at UCF before this. How quickly do you think he can flip things around?
Well, I think it's going to take a little more time than it did the first time around. He took over an 0-15 or 0-12 team, and then went 6-6, and then the next year they went undefeated at 13-0. I think because of the transfer portal and everything, there's a chance to do it quicker, but I think, it's going to take a little bit of time. He's going to have to recruit. He's going to have to get kind of the guys he wants to get in there. And then, you look at the schedule of the Big 12. When he had his successful year, it was in the American.
Sure.
He had an opportunity. Obviously, the two conferences are no very similar. So he feels like it's going to probably have a little bit more of a climb here this round with the Big 12. But, again, as a coach like him, you don't take a job if you don't think you're going to have an opportunity. So if he can get kind of some of the foundation set over the next couple of years, I think there's an opportunity for them to make a good push at some point.
Now, covering BYU like I do, by the time they show up in Provo, how different do you think that squad could look from the start of the year?
Well, it could look very different. I mean, they don't even have a starting quarterback. They're going into fall camp with a competition between three guys. Scott told us yesterday that he hopes to have a decision sooner rather than later, but he admitted, it may be the first week of the season, before we pick our quarterback. Well, depending on how that offense goes on that quarterback, it may be a different person by that going. If you got injuries and things like that. If everything works out for them, though, by the time they get to the BYU game, then you'd hope things have kind of, they've been able to stay healthy, that maybe they can make a run and they can have some wins and all that. If not, if they've struggled, if the health goes down and some guys get hurt, that BYU game could be very ugly for them, because a good opportunity to try to wrap the season up and move on from that. But let's not forget, they were 4-8 last year. They missed a bowl game for the first time since the 2015 season. So they would like to get back to be bowling eligible. And if that game becomes a game where they need to win it to be bowl eligible, there's going to be a lot more attention paid on it.
What's the UCF experience in the Big 12 been like? They came in the same time as BYU.
I think the experience has been interesting and fun for a lot of people. I mean, this fan base wanted to be in the Big 12 back in 2013, and they were so adamant that they thought they had an opportunity to do that, and then it just didn't happen. West Virginia came in and TCU, and now all of a sudden you're looking around and you get into this league, and it's a different league, and you're looking around at some of these teams, and now you're having an opportunity. The money is going to be much greater than it was in the American, and now that we're not getting the half share, and now they're getting a full share of money, I think that's going to make a huge impression for them. I think they're going to have an opportunity to be able to do a lot more things. They're starting to get a lot more focus on them, a lot more attention. Facilities are being upgraded, and you're seeing kind of all that going around. So I think that's going to help them out. I just think, as I've told fans over the last couple of years, is it's just going to take a little bit of time, because, again, baby steps until you kind of get yourself in there. It's hard to imagine you're going to hit the ground running in the Big 12 and compete for a championship by the time it's over.
Are they financially, is UCF feel like they're in a fairly good spot in terms of, the whole share coming in this year and everything?
UCF Athletic Director Terry Mahaja told me they've got the money, they're doing the full share this year. They feel like they'll have a good opportunity there. Now, they're not, when you look at NIL and things like that, they're nowhere near like the upper echelon of the Big 12. They can't compete with the Texas Techs, but they feel like if they can get in that top half, that they've got an opportunity. It's going to take a little bit of time for that. Again, this is a young school, a young fan base. They don't have the deep booster pockets that you see some of these other programs have, and they're trying to build that up, and it takes a little bit of time, and you still do some fundraising, and you try to find ways to monetize things, and they're rebuilding, they're enhancing the stadium. They hope that's going to help generate some revenue stream for them. If that could do that plus the full share, they feel like they have an opportunity maybe to keep themselves really ready to go.
There you go, Matt Marchelle from the Orlando Sentinel. A big thank you to him for taking the time. And he makes a very, very good point that come the end of the year, UCF could be feeling like, okay, we're gunning for a bowl game, or they could be just in the dregs and be like, okay, let's just get the season over with. And when UCF from Orlando, where it's probably going to be 80 degrees in late November, comes to Provo. Remember, Houston last year hadn't played a game all year long, and I think it was multiple years in a row where the game time temperature was less than 50 degrees until they showed up to Provo in late November. It was 29 degrees or whatever at kickoff, and you can tell Houston was uncomfortable with that. Well, Houston's not as warm as Orlando is. It's pretty warm, but UCF coming clear across the country in late November. Get ready, Knights fans. Bundle up, because it's going to be a crazy one. And me and Matt were actually joking about that after I push stop record. Hey, Matt, make sure you bring your big coat to Provo. He said, I'll be bundled up. I can assure you of that. But once again, a big thank you to Matt for taking the time to join us here on the podcast. All right. that's going to do it for this Pioneer edition of the pod, a Pioneer Day edition of the podcast, I should say. We'll be back with you guys again tomorrow, wrapping up the week, wrapping up my final day of vacation, more importantly, but didn't want to leave you guys empty-handed. A lot of good stuff still to go, but hey, we are getting closer and closer to BYU training camp starting up next week. Expectations of the Cougars report on July 29th. First practices on July 30th, excuse me. And then obviously a month-long camp to come ahead of the kickoff of the college football season. And we'll be talking more about it tomorrow, right here on Locked On Cougars.